This Sunday begins John's series of sermons on the Ten Commandments. Our first reading this morning is going to be found in Exodus chapter 20, verse 3. Hear now the reading of God's holy word. You shall have no other gods before me. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God.
You shall have no other gods before me. That's simple enough, isn't it? God is number one. We could just call it a Sunday and come back next week for commandment number 2. Except, what if God with a capital G isn't number 1? What if somehow God with a small g moves into the number 1 place? It's not supposed to be, but what if? That was the point then, and it is still the point today. Let's take a look at what it meant to them then, and then fast forward into our own time and think about what it means for us. On that day when Moses met God at the burning bush, people of that time had 2 kinds of gods that they worshipped. They had gods of nature. You had a god of the sun, and a god of the rain, and a god of the wind, and a god of the sky, and a god of fire. And at the same time they had those gods, they had gods over particular pieces of geographic territory. The Amorites had a god named Chemosh. In the land of the Amorites, he reigned supreme. But when the Amorites made war and had to cross over into somebody else's territory, Chemosh was not supreme, the neighboring territory, and so he couldn't help them quite as much as he could at home. It's kind of a foreign way for us to think about things. Let me see if I can drive it home by using an example of school mascots. Now, let's say a long time ago, and over in the country of Swain, they worship a god who is sort of an off-red devil, maybe a maroon devil, and they pay homage and honor and venerate this god, so he will help them in all their endeavors, especially football. Okay. And in Swain, the maroon devil reigns supreme. However, when you get over to the land of Jackson and cross the line, the maroon devil is not held in such veneration. Over in the country of Jackson, they worship some sort of a horse god. And they honor and venerate him the same way they honor and venerate the maroon devil over in Swain. Each of them reigns supreme in their own land, but not in the other place. And that's the way it was back then. All the time, everywhere, you would travel 100 miles and you would be in some other god's territory. The day Moses met God at the burning bush, God said to Moses something that was revolutionary. He said, Moses, I'm a different kind of God. I'm the God of wind and rain and fire and earth and storm, all rolled into one. I'm also the God of every place you can name. I'm not limited by anybody's border. I have power wherever I go, and I want to be your God, Moses, and I want to be the God of your people. If you will follow me, I will take you to a new land, and there you will be my people, and I will establish you forever if you put aside all other gods. Well, hard to beat a deal like that. They accepted it, didn't turn it down, But here's the problem. They couldn't make it work on a continuous basis. And sometimes we can't either, and that's the thing we have in common with the ancient Hebrews. Methodist preacher named Ellsworth Kalis used a word that helps see it clearly. When God said, "You shall have no other gods before me," God was saying in contemporary language, "You shall make me your priority. You shall make me number one." Priority and number one, those are two phrases that we understand because they're very current in our usage. Making God our priority implies that there are other choices. And there are other choices, always have been and always will be. Right after I moved down to Cherokee County as a very young pastor, an older man walked up to me on the sidewalk in Murphy, a stranger, and he said, "You're the new preacher on the Methodist circuit, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Well, young man, if you'd like, I have some advice I'd like to share with you." I told him I'd like to hear it. Never hurts. This is what he said to me. Out here, there's 4 things that are most important in our lives. More important than anything else. It's religion, it's family, it's politics, and it's football. But he said, not always in the same order. And then he said, "You remember that, young man, and you'll be all right." And with a nod of his head, he disappeared down the street, and I never saw him again in 4 years. But you know something? He was right. And he was right about every place that I have ever lived. There is a short list of things that are most important, but the order sometimes changes on us. It was a World War chaplain who made that famous comment, "There are no atheists in foxholes." What did he mean? He meant in a real crisis, everybody believes in God, even if normally they don't believe in God. But once the crisis is over, things change. We have a priority in every time of our lives, but sometimes that priority moves around. Some things I've heard through the years. "John, I'm having a big problem at church. After what so-and-so did to me, I cannot worship if I have to sit here and look at them in church. I'm not going to leave this church. This is my church, but you're not going to see me around for a while, and hopefully so-and-so will quit coming and I can come back." Changing priorities? Maybe. "John, the next couple of years are really crucial in the development of my business. I'm going to need all my weekends to entertain and work my business contacts, play golf, look after people, and build the contacts that I hope through the week will help me establish my business. If I don't do it now, it will never happen. This is my church. I'm not leaving it, but you're not going to see me for the next couple of years very much at all." Changing priorities? "John, both our boys are on a traveling soccer team. I don't know where they got their athletic ability, but the coaches say that they both have the potential to get college scholarships. And so we're going to make an investment in seeing if that can't happen for them. Between the two of them, it's going to be every weekend somewhere for the next 3 or 4 years, this is still our church, but you won't know it because you won't see us much. But know that this is still our church. Change your priorities. John, our daughter, has such incredible talent as a cheerleader that we're putting her on the finest competition team that we can find. Coach says that she stands a great chance of getting a college scholarship. That means that there are going to be competitions, team competitions, every weekend. And when there aren't team competitions, we'll be entering her in individual competitions, and there'll be a lot of traveling. This is still our church, but you won't see much of us for the next couple of years because we've got to take advantage of this opportunity. Change of priority. Preacher comes home one night. He's been interviewing at several churches in new locations. Walks in and says, "Honey, I just got a phone call from that church that we interviewed at a couple of weeks ago. They want me to come be their pastor. It's got 3 times the membership, twice the salary. I'm going to go pray about it. While I go pray about it, you go upstairs and start packing." Change your priority? Yes, sir. The old man in Murphy said to me, it's politics, it's religion, it's football, it's family, but remember, young man, the order always keeps changing. Yesterday's number 1 may turn out to be today's number 3, and last year's number 4 may turn out to be next year's number 1. And we don't always notice when it's happening. We say God is number 1 because that's the way we were raised to think. It's what we believe. But saying it doesn't always make it so. In our time, it's a mark of honor to say that we can multitask. And the more multitasking we can do, the better we feel about ourselves, because that's one of the things that our society really appreciates. And one of the things that we sometimes delude ourselves into thinking is that we can give God His due and have 3 or 4 other priorities working at the same time because we are such good jugglers of everything in our lives. One of the things as men and women of faith that we have to be able to do on a constant basis is to be able to step back and look at ourselves long and hard to be sure things are really the way we think they are, as opposed to somehow thinking that they are the way they were a while back, not having noticed that the priorities in our life are moving around. National Football League is trying to do that right now with regard to domestic violence. Anybody on the outside can look in and say very clearly what the problem is. One of the things we're learning is that the National Football League, when they're looking at themselves, having a hard time coming to a good conclusion. One of the hazards, we can always look at someone else and say what needs to be. It is so hard sometimes to step outside of ourselves and look back and see exactly how things are with us. Someone over in Haywood County was telling me about his uncle who had a big old Bradford pear tree about 20, 30 feet off his front porch, and a big, loud, noisy, obnoxious bird took up residence in that Bradford pear tree and just started making racket and noise that finally got on this fellow's uncle to the point that he went in the house, got a double-barrel shotgun, and came out and blew the center out of that Bradford pear tree to where you could see all the way through it. Took care of the bird. The next weekend, the family has a cookout at the house, and everybody fills their plate and comes around to that big long front porch and is sitting there in a chair balancing a plate full of hamburgers and hot dogs, and they hear a bird, a big, loud, obnoxious bird. And they look up, and in that big hole in the middle of the Bradford pear tree on a limb sits the bird making the noise. There's a moment of silence, and the fellow said his uncle breaks the silence by saying, "There must have been two of them." Everyone on the porch falls over laughing, except his uncle, who sits there oblivious to the truth. And the truth is that with a double-barrel shotgun, he missed the mark. Sometimes in life, we don't always hit what we're aiming at. And it's important to know yourself well enough and be honest enough about who you are to step back outside everything that's going on in your life and look at what you're aiming at and whether you're hitting it or whether you're missing it. With regard to our relationship to God, it is really important because it is our goal as men and women of faith to have God with a capital G as our number one priority. If, for some reason, God with a lowercase g slips into that number one slot, it's a downhill slide as far as the other 9 commandments are concerned. The poet said, "To thine own self be true." The person of faith says, know yourself so that you can be true to yourself and to the God you worship, to whom be glory and honor and power and dominion, world without end. Will you bow with me as I pray a prayer for each of us? Give me, oh God, eyes to see myself as I truly am, so that I can be yours, all of me, not just part of me. I ask this in the name of Him who wants me to honor, to worship, and to follow Him all the days of my life. Amen.